The first laugh came from Uncle Joao. He was sitting in his usual place at the end of our long, dark wood dining table, elbows planted, picking at his cigarette burns on the surface. My interview tapes, stacked by the credenza in their battered case, gleamed in the sodium kitchen light. I barely finished describing my investigative series on government housing before he snorted and muttered to no one, "So, she wants to be another TV crusader." One by one, the others joined in. My cousin Inez giggled, her hair all wound up in a high, scornful knot. My mother shifted, silent, her mouth pressed in a thin line as she passed salt to my father. He, for his part, didn't say much either, just thumping his fork louder than usual. There was sardonic warmth in their derision, the comfort of repeated family jokes, but this time it had teeth. They prodded me with their doubts, camouflaged as teasing. The pitch of it all rose and cracked in the sticky, fishy heat of a September evening, with windows thrown open to the traffic noise from Alfama. I barely finished eating. Every bite tasted like cement and nerves. Someone mentioned I would be better off as a tour guide for tourists chasing photo bars. Maybe then I could actually see what I write about. Someone else, my older brother, I think, chimed in that journalism in Lisbon was for the boss's daughters, and not for someone who can't keep her hands clean. Each remark landed, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp. My fingers curled tight around my tape recorder. Of all of them, only my grandmother remained silent, her gaze unwavering, cloudy blue, ancient, seeing through the dinner-time spectacle to someplace rawer. But she, too, looked tired. After dessert, the critique shifted from sarcastic to cruel, especially when my mother slid the red grapes toward me. "You'll just end up tired, unpaid, chasing gossip." She kept her tone matter-of-fact, not unkind, but not offering comfort either. People like us, Menina, we make our peace with what is. Those things you want, they aren't real. Months earlier, after I had been denied a placement at the biggest paper in the city, I'd started my own blog. There were enough rumors and rumors of rumors in the crumbling alleys of Bairro da Liberdade, enough broken promises in Bairro da Serafina to fill my notebooks for 10 years. It wasn't glamorous, just me and my tape recorder eating stale pastéis at cheap counters and paying out of my own pocket for badly working bus rides to places my family had always told me to avoid. Every night, after those dinners, after enduring the small jabs and rolling their eyes each time my name appeared in another, tinier publication, I would walk through the streets. The city's nighttime breath sang on tramlines, hovering above trash bags and past wrought iron balconies. I'd practice my questions for the next day's interviews, letting my voice catch and break in the darkness to the rhythm of footsteps on uneven stone. They were right, mostly. I wasn't paid. The editors used me for scraps, assigning me stories of stray dogs and graffiti. Never the real crimes that rested under the city's melancholy charm. But on weekends, I chased my own leads. I kept notebooks in triplicate, each margin filled with local slang, hidden codes. Sometimes, my investigations felt like shouting into a hurricane, stories swept away before anyone cared. It wasn't just the family. Neighbors who saw me lurking with my battered messenger bag muttered about that one, the journalist, as if it were a stain that wouldn't wash out. I got the sense people wanted to convince me I was nothing special, so I wouldn't leave. Portugal's capital has a way of threatening anyone who dares to want too much. The lowest moment came in an editing studio months later. I was working for a community radio station on a story about corrupt housing officials. I'd gotten close, too close, so my editor called me in for a word. Studio critique, he called it. Feedback, he promised, pouring cheap vino into a chipped mug as I stood in the harsh white glare of his crumbling office. He listened for maybe 10 minutes, every so often stopping to interject a long sigh or ask, "Is that really a story, or are you making things up to impress us?" Each question carried implications, but I kept pushing on, laying out my facts, my sources, the hours walking Biro de Liberdade and sitting on cracked tile with single mothers who knew how to slip money under the table to keep their flats. He was uninterested, a veteran, his bitterness older than me. "You're obsessed, Anna. You think you're Maria Lopes," he said finally, brushing invisible crumbs from his beard. "No one in this city cares. No one ever does." This isn't Lisbon in the 70s. There are no more revolutions. I felt humiliation burning behind my eyes, fear pricking every part of my body. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt packed with cement. Afterward, I escaped to the mess of alleyways behind the studio and sat until dawn, sweat sticking my shirt to my back, replaying every phrase, every laugh. Even the city felt against me. The stones bit into my skin and the smell of the river at low tide stung my nose. Yet somewhere beneath the fear, defiance hummed, a taut wire strung between all the places I had never been allowed into and all the stories I had only just begun to uncover. I decided then, at sunrise, that I would keep going, not for them, not for the ones who laughed, but for the ones who told me their stories, the ones who could not speak. I kept going because I was too angry not to. Years passed. Lisbon changed. More foreign plates on cars, more Airbnbs and closed bakeries, more polished trams. My father's hair grayed, and my mother pretended not to notice. I moved out, sharing 3-bedroom flats with other men and women who had come to Lisbon for their own impossible dreams. I ate falafel at midnight and learned to chase court documents as if they were ghosts. For a long time, the city ignored me. Even so, the stories I gathered became a living history of people lost between new wealth and old shame. I continued writing at odd hours, selling pieces to magazines no one in my family read. A profile of a trafficked Nigerian boy, a deep dive on eviction notices sent without signatures. Sometimes newspapers did not pay me. Sometimes sources vanished. Sometimes, at the end of a long day, I stood on my tiny balcony and wondered if they'd been right all along. But journalism is as much patience as it is defiance. One day, there was a break. A source tipped me to a network of landlords, politicians, and property speculators cheating hundreds of families out of their homes. It wasn't new. Everyone had whispered it for years, but no one had traced the cash, the names, the patterns. No one had sat in the Beiro da Serafina, eating burnt toast and counting the times the same lawyer's car reappeared each week. I followed leads day after day, writing in scrawls at dawn and typing until the sun made my skin itch. I went places the quiet, respectable folks on Rua Augusta never mentioned. When one door slammed shut, another creaked open. I wore the same shoes until they fell apart at the seams. In between, my family called less. My mother texted to remind me that your cousin Inez is expecting. My father, out of habit, would ask, "E então, filha, já arranjaste trabalho normal?" Sometimes I went for months without seeing them. The old bitterness ebbed, leaving only a dull hollow in my gut. Then, one winter, after 5 years of chasing stories, I published the big one. It ran on the front page of the top national paper, my byline beneath a headline that named names, numbers, places, and called for an investigation into the entire city council's housing contracts. There was proof, tapes, emails, a paper trail so solid even the politicians could only call it old news and hope it blew over. For 2 weeks, the city turned itself inside out. Protesters marched. Social workers called their own press conferences. The housing minister resigned. My face tired and sallow from too many nights without sleep, appeared on late-night talk shows. Everyone started asking, how did she know? On the internet, people called me brave, called me a rat, called me everything in between. At night, I lay awake in my cramped flat, unsure who to trust, jumping at every sound from the street. But I had done it, something real, incontrovertible, as tangible as the rain spattering my windows. My return was not planned. Eventually, the noise quieted. The city moved on as it always does. My life changed in small ways. A little money, a little respect, a job offer from an investigative team in Madrid I would soon accept. People I had once chased suddenly answered my calls. My grandmother's birthday was approaching. At first, my mother phoned with the old mixture of apology and command, inviting me for dinner. Them, Anna, your brother will be there, even Inez and her boyfriend. We don't see you anymore. Her voice faltered, tender with old wounds. So I went. I brought a cake, purchased, not baked, and a bottle of green wine. I wore the best clothes I had. Black jeans, a blouse without holes, my hair smoothed into something resembling order. The city at dusk, golden as honey, rippled with tourists, but also with old ghosts, my own among them. Inside the apartment, everything was as I remembered. The scratchy rug, cabinet smelling of old eucalyptus, the cracked mirror by the door. My brother opened before I could knock twice, his face unsure, his smile quick to fade. They seemed smaller, all of them, tired, circled under their eyes like bruises, real people, not caricatures. Look who's finally arrived, Uncle Joao said as he poured ginja into thimble-sized glasses. Will you tell us how to find the truth now, señorita jornalista? He chuckled but did not look away. My mother hesitated, busying herself reheating soup, but her embrace was longer than I expected, arms tight. Inés, even 8 months pregnant, was less smug, more curious, offering a real soft smile. During dinner, they tiptoed around it. The story, the scandal, my sudden appearance in online headlines. They talked about my cousin's baby, my father's blood pressure, the new elevators in Baixa. Every so often, someone snuck looks at me, as if waiting for me to announce my presence on a stage. After cake, my grandmother set down her fork and gestured for me to come closer. Ana, filha, let's see this thing you did, she said, voice barely above a whisper, but stronger than anyone else's words all night. I opened my bag and pulled out the paper. The paper. I didn't want to be dramatic. It felt almost embarrassing, childish, but there was no other way. I unfolded the front page, smoothing it against the faded tablecloth, headlines staring up at the ceiling. My name in print, pictures